Hello friends, a very warm welcome. And as we have seen in our first session where we have discussed and tried to understand the most basic concepts of environment and ecology. I hope you have make your own points and you are also trying to Google search more examples, whatever I try to discuss. And I again request my all students that they must do assignments which have been given to them and they must also cross check all the answers. Going to the part 2 or you can say session 2, we will discuss again very important and basic concepts which are fundamental to the understanding of environment and ecology. Environment, we have already discussed in basics. So we understand and agree that each and every living organism is having a specific surrounding, a medium of environment in which it is continuously interacting, and that is why it is adapting to the nature. So environment is the sum total of physical, biotic conditions and influencing the responses of the organisms. Can you think of some examples over here? Just think of wildlife or even domestic animals, or even think about the impact of infrastructure and development on the large forest areas which are being depleted. Going forward, what is biosphere? So biosphere composed of three chief media: air, water and soil. They are the three most important components, or one can say most important ingredients. And what are the three major subdivisions? That is atmosphere, hydrosphere and lithosphere. And most importantly, they are not existing in isolation. They are in continuous interaction with each other. Let's first understand atmosphere. Multi-layered gaseous envelope surrounding the planet Earth. Multi-layered gaseous envelope are the keywords. Divided into five distinct layers or zones: troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, ionosphere and exosphere. We are going to discuss all of them shortly. First, let's see troposphere. Many important climatic events including cloud formation, lightning, thundering, thunderstorm formation, they all are taking place in troposphere. The percentage concentration of different gases in air does not vary with an increase in height, but we have to understand the water vapor content in air depends upon weather. So what we can understand is that the part of troposphere over an ocean will be carrying more moisture than the part which is over a land surface, and it is decreasing sharply with increase in height, as does the air temperature. That means air temperature in this zone is gradually decreasing with height at the rate of about 6.5 degree centigrade or Celsius per kilometer. At tropopause, there is a constant temperature. Further, the non-uniform heating of the ground surface by the sun's radiation, it is producing both ascending and descending air currents, which is causing turbulence and mixing of air masses vertically. One more fact is that the average pressure of Earth's surface is about 1014 millibars. So you can just note or make a kind of a diagram so that you can understand and revise it better. Similarly, in stratosphere, which is next to troposphere, or it is the second zone, is about at the 30 kilometer in height. Free from clouds, aeroplanes usually flying in stratosphere in the lower zone. Temperature is increasing up to 90 degrees centigrade, and an increase in temperature is there because of the ozone formation under the influence of ultraviolet component of sunlight, and such layer of ozone is called ozone sphere. And in ozonosphere, the sunlight ionizes oxygen to ozone by photochemical dissociation. This process of photochemical dissociation we will discuss separately. Coming to mesosphere, so mesosphere is the next zone which is about 40 kilometer in height, And in mesosphere, temperature again decrease up to 80 degrees centigrade, and upper layers of this zone form mesopause. Ionosphere contains several layers of stratospheres, and one can say that as we are moving further, it is reflecting more and more layers. There are short radio waves in this sphere which are making telecommunication possible over long distances. Exosphere is the sphere where the air density is very low and hydrogen is the dominant element over here. So what is the key word here is the physiological and ecological interrelationship of gases and animals is very important, because the atmospheric composition is not always the most important factor to organism, but it is the partial pressure of gas. Remember, partial pressure of gas, especially oxygen and carbon dioxide, which is influencing the existence of life. And you can understand this when you Google altitudinal studies on organisms. So, we can also conclude the solubility characteristics of oxygen and carbon dioxide in water. You know, when you just hypothetically think of mixing them, carbon dioxide is about 200 times more soluble than oxygen, and temperature and salinity, they have evident effects on solubility of these two gases. That means for both oxygen and both for carbon dioxide, temperature and salinity will make an impact. Either it will increase temperature, or with increased salinity, there is a decrease in their solubility in water. So these are certain kind of empirical evidences which we have seen through research and through understanding. Green plants regulate the oxygen and carbon dioxide balance in atmosphere by the process of photosynthesis. We already know that. In the process of photosynthesis, green plants are using carbon dioxide and they are releasing O2 during the daytime. Oxygen is used in respiration by all the organisms all the times. Therefore, photosynthesis is regulating oxygen and carbon dioxide balance in the nature, and the nitrogen which is evidently present in the atmosphere is not directly used by the plants and animals except some bacteria and blue-green algae. So, if gases are to be seen as functionally important to an organism, there must be a mechanism by which these gas can enter or leave the body of an organism. And apparently, the passage of oxygen across a membrane must take place, which is done through diffusion. So the rate of diffusion is calculated by Fick's law, which is based on the concentration coefficient, amount of surface thickness of the membrane, time taken, and is expressed as diffusion coefficient. For your understanding, I am just sharing. The diffusion coefficient value is not the same for different animal tissues. And I think you can obviously guess why is it so. Otherwise, we will discuss in our interactions. When we come to hydrosphere, ocean, rivers, streams, lakes, ponds, pools, polar ice caps, water vapor, etc., they are forming hydrosphere. So 3/4, that is 75% of the Earth's surface is covered with hydrosphere, the main component of which is water, and the water remains in solid, that is snow form, liquid water, and gaseous, that is water vapor form. Water is one of the main agents, that is pedogenesis, that is it is helping in soil formation, and is a medium, it is a very important medium for several different ecosystems. What we know is that water is heavier than air, and it is what we can say which water is heavier than air, and which is imparting a great buoyancy or buoyant force to the aquatic medium, thereby enabling organisms to float at variable levels. We know that animals in water and in oceans and in lakes, they float at different levels. The most unique feature of water is with respect to its physical properties, which we are going to see very soon. So the physical properties of water includes the fact that it is a universal solvent. No other known substance could be substituted for water as a basic abiotic environmental factor. Why? Why is it so? First is the heat capacity. Water has a very high heat capacity. It can withhold large amounts of heat. And because of the high heat capacity of water, oceans and lakes tend to maintain a relatively constant temperature. Therefore, temperature of biosphere also remains relatively stable. That is why we always get worried that if the temperature increases, it will have direct impact on the temperature of oceans and water. Latent heat of melting and evaporation. So what is latent heat of melting? It is the number of calories required to convert 1 gram of solid at a freezing point into 1 gram of liquid at the same temperature. That is called the latent heat of melting. The latent heat of evaporation is defined as the number of calories required to change 1 gram of liquid into water vapor. For water, this value is 536. So why these properties are important? Because they are moderating the temperature of the biosphere. They are making Earth as a blue planet. Life is there on the planet because of this. They are playing a very important role in the evaporation of water, precipitation as rain, and as dew in water cycle or hydrological cycle. As far as thermal conductivity is concerned, although water is a poor thermal conductor compared to metals, but among the common liquids, it is excellent. Why do we say so? We have to understand that conductivity value for silver is 1.10, for water it is 0.0125, and but for alcohol it is 0.00048, and for benzene it is 0.00033. So just understand why it becomes so important, and UPSC asks questions with respect to this basic understanding. Expansion before freezing is a very unique feature of water, and it has been asked number of times in the prelims exam. So the relationship between temperature and density or the mass per unit volume is very unusual. When the water is cooled from room temperature, it contracts and becomes denser until it is reaching a maximum density at 3.94 degrees centigrade. If it is cooled further, then it begins to expand again. So at the freezing point, that is 0 degrees centigrade, it expands markedly, unlike almost other substances. That is why ice will always float on the top of a lake or a stream, and it is very unusual for an aquatic ecosystem ever to freeze to solid, especially in the case of very small, aquatic bodies. Another feature is surface tension. Water has the greatest surface tension among all liquids, except mercury. Why? Because the role of surface tension is so important because it is allowing certain things such as pollen, dust, and water striders to remain at the surface of a water body, even though they are denser than the water and they are not drowning inside water. Most importantly, the high surface tension of water allows soil to contain significant amount of water through capillary attraction and make it available to terrestrial plants. That is why we say that the features of water are extraordinary, and number of questions have been asked. When it comes to physiochemical properties of water, viscosity. So water is fairly viscous liquid. Animals that live and move in water need to be more streamlined than those move through air because the resistance to motion in a viscous medium is high. But at the same time, viscosity of water is allowing organisms to swim relatively simple movements. So higher viscosity of water protects the aquatic animals and plants from mechanical disturbances. Now just visualize and just think. You know so many animals. We have discussed about so many organisms, how they are surviving in water, how they are able to migrate and travel so long. Please make a list. Buoyancy, water is a buoyant medium. Organisms can exist in it without specialized supportive structures. But when we think about the organisms which are inhabiting terrestrial environment, they need certain structure. Such structure is not required in case of animals living in water or around water because they are having the force of buoyancy with them. Water is a transparent medium. Its transparency is enabling penetration of light to the depth where it is ultimately absorbed. Different wavelengths are absorbed at different lengths. The long heat waves are stopped near surface. Shorter waves with more energy, they penetrate successively further. Ultraviolet rays penetrate beyond 100 meters. So these facts help us to understand that why and how certain kind of development and certain features are there. The zone up to which light ray penetrates is called photic zone, and below this zone is complete darkness, and organisms that require light cannot live there. Transparency of water is greatly affected by the presence of suspended particles including phytoplanktons. Questions have been asked number of times again. These are the very core concepts. Please listen carefully and make your own notes. So It is absorbing light and penetration of light in turbid water is less. When we think about pressure, organisms living at sea level experience pressure at about 15, which is defined as 1 atmosphere or 760 mm of Hg. So the pressure increases with the increasing depth of water at the rate of 1 atmosphere for every 10 meters of descent. Just think about it, that how even when we do scuba diving or when we are talking about submarines, how they will be handling such a huge amount of pressure. Organisms inhabiting the floor of deep sea areas at the depth of 10,500 meters are exposed to hydrostatic pressure of about 1 ton per square centimeter. 1 ton, please think about it. So the pressure influences solubility, iconic, ionic dissociation, surface tension, and water is slightly compressible with increased pressure. When it comes to salinity, salinity has been defined as the total amount of solid materials in grams contained in 1 kg of water. When all carbonate has been converted into oxide, bromine and iodine replaced by chlorine, all organic matter is completely oxidized. Okay, just go through this concept again. All these salts are responsible for saltiness or the salt content of water. So the salinity of marine water is rather constant. Certain animals such as spider, crab, they can tolerate only narrow fluctuations in salinity of water. That is why when we say there are changes, then it brings havoc for the wildlife. And because they can tolerate only narrow fluctuations, they are known as stenohaline animals. While as some animals such as Mytilus and Aplysia, they can withstand large ranges of salinity. They are called euryhaline animals. However, there are certain animals which can handle both stenohaline and euryhaline conditions. They are also there, for example, salmon and anguilla. So let's try to understand chemical properties of water. Oxygen is one of the most critical factors in the aquatic environment. Is amount of oxygen in water, because most living organisms except anaerobic forms, they require this gas for respiration. That is true. So in contrast to atmosphere, oxygen becomes the limiting factor for aquatic animals, as the saturation concentration of oxygen in water is governed by temperature. So it is different from the land surface. So it is governed by not just temperature but salinity also. The lower the temperature, the greater the oxygen retaining capacity of water, whether it is the fresh water. So as we were saying, let's try to see that what is the role of nitrogen over here. Nitrogen is significantly less soluble in water than oxygen. But we also know that it is constituting 78% of the atmosphere. And it is accounting for about 65% of the dissolved gases at equilibrium. What is more true about nitrogen, it is a fairly inert chemically. It is not reacting with water, although some bacteria, fungi, blue-green algae and so on can use it to satisfy nitrogen requirements. There are other bacteria also which can produce it through reduction of nitrate under conditions of very low oxygen concentration. Now let's see carbon dioxide. The decomposition of organic matter, which we see and which we know, and the respiratory activity of aquatic plants and animals, it is producing carbon dioxide. This gas is one of the essential raw materials for necessary photosynthetic activity. Without photosynthetic activity by green plants, nothing can be carried out. Carbon dioxide is combining chemically with water to produce carbonic acid H2CO3, which influences the hydrogen ion concentration pH of water. So the amount of free or uncombined carbon dioxide in water is of ecological importance. We say so, and we know this because it is governing the precipitation of calcium in the form of calcium carbonate. Now think about the coral bleaching. Think about other kind of sea life. Calcium precipitates when the temperature and salinity are high and the amount of uncombined carbon dioxide is low. Now these conditions are existing in shallow tropical waters where evaporation is high, and this is raising the salinity and photosynthetic activity of plants, and it is reducing the quantity of free carbon dioxide in water. This is one of the important conditions. But In the deep oceanic water, temperature is low, no photosynthetic plants, the carbon dioxide content of water is very high. So the deep water fauna like mollusks and crustaceans, they possess fragile skeleton because the precipitation of calcium carbonate is minimum over there. Now let's see hydrogen sulfide. The deep layer of many bodies of water, including ponds, lakes and some estuaries, they may contain significant amount of toxic gas such as hydrogen sulfide, which is released by decaying organic matter. So if the concentration of gas is building up, all life except anaerobic bacteria will be excluded from there. For example, the deep strata of Black Sea. You can just Google and see the images also. So what we can say about water and ecological adaptations? We agree that water makes up a large proportion of bodies of plants and animals, whether they live on land or water. Active cytoplasm holds 70 to 90% of water. It has several important physiological properties. There exists a strong relationship between water status of soil, plants and atmosphere. So the rooting zone of soil, it is that zone where you can say water is being absorbed and the roots and root hairs are present. The plant body and the lower layer of atmosphere, they behave a kind of a continuum. That means a kind of a speck or space where the soil plant atmosphere continuum is going on, and the relationship is showcasing transfer of water or water transfer accordingly. These developments are very important because they are reflecting when there is scarcity or abundance of water, it is helping in adaptation of different kind of animals. So let's see. The plants which grow in areas where water is available in plenty, they are called mesophytes. And the terrestrial animals living under such conditions are called mesocoels. So plant growing under water are called hydrophytes, while the animals living in aquatic environment are called aquatic animals or hydrocoels. Similarly, some plants can grow in ecosystem where water is very less, scarcity of water is there, the day temperature is very high, such as in deserts. These plants are called xerophytes. And the animal living in such xeric conditions are called desert animals or xerocoels. So you have to remember what is mesophyte, what is mesocoels, what is hydrophytes, what is hydrocoels, what is xerophytes, what is xerocoels. So xerophytes living in physiologically dry soils, for example, saline soils with high concentration of salt, such as in Rann of Kutch, they will have sodium chloride, magnesium sulfate, they are called halophytes. So Helophilous halophytes includes mangroves of seashores of Bombay or even of Andamans, such as Rhizopora, Micronata and so on. So these understanding can help us to remember different animals and plants. Let's see hydrophytes and hydrocoels and their adaptations. So hydrophytes, it will be including free floating hydrophytes such as Pistia, Wolfia, and one more name you can always remember. Rooted hydrophytes with floating leaves such as Marsilia or Trappa. Similarly, there are submerged floating hydrophytes. They are little bit submerged also, they are floating also, such as Nasas or Keratophyllum. Similarly, there is rooted submerged hydrophytes such as Hydrilla, and rooted emergent hydrophytes or amphibious plants. That means they are actually in water also and on land also. Ctenogophytes are amphibious plants. They grow in water bodies as well as waterlogged soil, as I was saying. So adaptation is there. So they are possessing poor mechanical absorbing conductive and protective tissues. They are having extensive development of air spaces because we are knowing that they are not even in water completely and they are not on soil completely. They are in a waterlogged area. That is why they are having such large air spaces and which is helping them to develop further. So in such cases, roots either will be absent or they will be poorly developed. Root may not have root hairs, a root cap and vascular tissue, you know, they will also be absent in certain cases, and the aerial leaves which are there, they will be very broad, but they may be submerged, and some are submerged, they will be thin, long and ribbon like. So what I'm saying is that which is there on the top, which is not inside water, they will be broad, they have to, inhaling capacity kind of thing, and which are submerged, they are thin, long and ribbon like, so that they can adjust the flow of water. Stomata are completely absent in submerged leaves, which is very true, but in floating forms such stomata is confined to the upper surfaces of leaves. So such a wonderful adaptation we can say. And let's see in xerophytes and xerocoels. They are growing in conditions of water scarcity, high temperatures, strong winds, high transpiration, and the rate of evaporation is very high. Soil is very dry and porous. These are essential adaptations. There will be increased absorption by roots, storing of water, retardation of transpiration, कुछ भी करके ऐसा करना होगा. So all these xerophytes are called succulents because they are possessing thick, fleshy water storage organs such as stems, leaves, roots. पानी बचाना है. So mangroves are resembling xerophytes and they have high osmotic pressure, succulent organs, thin evergreen, small leathery leaves with water storing tissues and thick cuticles and special air breathing roots called pneumatophores. You have to just Google, go and look for images and you will be able to correlate complete understanding. There will be a kind of a clarity when you look for images. It is purposefully not given here. Similarly, different animals have evolved the following adaptive features living in arid environment. Nocturnal lifestyle. So most deserts are nocturnal. They seeking shade and burrow deep inside soil in the daytime because they want to avoid excessive heat and dryness. Zero cold rodents. They passively lose heat through conduction by pressing their bodies against burrow walls. See what a beauty. Deceptive coloration. They are usually gray and brown and red color matching with the color of sand and rock. Suspended animation. Usually they are the simpler organisms such as rotifers, nematodes, desert snails, and they are retaining their vitality in the long dry environment. Other forms such as frogs, toads, they are actually active during the moist season of the year. That is why they are called estivate. Fast movement is very important for desert animals since they have to travel long distances in search of food and water. Migration, they are migrating when the water becomes scarce or as a result of drought, flood, or you can say the food supply is less. So what we are trying to see is that there are adaptation because of certain reasons. Heat loss by radiation is also there. Animals such as jackrabbits, fox, they have large ears to reduce the need of water evaporation to regulate their body temperature. Their ears are functioning as efficient radiators to the cooler desert sky. Let's see what is their skin type. So impervious skin is there because the drier habitats, that is desert, are invaded by only those animals which contain thick impermeable body covering. Because such integuments are occurring in many insects and birds and mammals such as men, apes, horses. They are losing much water and salt through sweat glands in heat regulation. And in case of desert animals, or you can say organisms such as rodents and ruminants such as antelope, they will be lacking any kind of sweat glands. Most skin forms such as amphibians, earthworms, and even mites and soft body insects are restricted to swamps, stream margins, moist soils so that they can live very efficiently. Upturned nostril is another example. Desert animals have upturned nostrils. That means their nostrils are directed upwards so that they are protected from clogging by the wind blown sand. So you can understand how beautiful and how efficiently and how empirically nature have made them. Water from food and from metabolism is an important, very, very important issue because most herbivores and carnivores live on the moisture obtained from food. Many insects utilize the high water content of plants to meet their water requirements. Animals will be making use of water released during metabolism when the fats and carbohydrates are broken. For example, kangaroo rat, which seals its burrow by the day to keep its chamber moist. It can live throughout the year without drinking water. It obtained its water from its own metabolic process and from hygroscopic water in its food. So this nocturnal kangaroo rat in California desert is a master of water conservation. Instead of drinking water, it gets the water it needs from its food and from cellular respiration. It also conserves water by excreting dry feces and thickly, nearly solid urine. We can apply this whole concept to other animals also. Internal lungs and tracheal system is another example because the mode of respiration is also changed. Crustaceans, with their gills covered by water-retaining carapace, carry with them a liquid environment for their gills. The scaly body covering of a fish may be practically impermeable to water and exchange of gases because it is limited to gills and gut. So you can see that how interesting and how scientific it is. Dry excretion, as I just said, it is another example, water saving. It is a water saving technique or device because relatively dry nitrogenous and fecal waste material is there. Water saving insects, reptiles, birds, they excrete nitrogen waste and solid uric acid. For example, when camel drinks water, it can drink up to 50 liters in one gulp. This water is evenly distributed throughout its body, tissues, and it is not to specific body parts. Camel excretes highly concentrated urine, and dung is also like that. Very little water it is having. It is not like the dung of donkey or cow. It respires very little, breathing rhythm is very slow. Camel can withstand dehydration, that is 25% of body weight, and it loses water from body tissues rather than from the blood. So you just see and apply this to other animals in other kind of conditions. Body temperature of camel is labile, dropping to 33 degrees centigrade overnight and raising to 40 degrees centigrade by the day, at which point it begins to sweat. Due to such thermoregulation, the amount of water lost by perspiration and in other ways is greatly reduced. So camel accumulates its fats in hump rather than all over body. As I just said, the speed this speed heats flow away from the body, and the thick coat prevents the flow of heat inwards towards the body. So when we see this kind of application to other animals, here I have discussed about camel. You can think about tiger. You can think about elephant. You can think about crocodile, and just try to see common famous animals, and you will understand it completely. Though we will discuss it also elsewhere. Now let's see soil fauna and soil flora. Soil supports wide array of organisms. We know different body sizes, taxonomic groups. Soil organisms are classified into three major groups, namely microfauna, microflora, mesofauna, macrofauna. So mesoflora and macroflora, they are occurring above the surface of soil, that is land surface. Let's first see what is microfauna. Microfauna means 20 micrometer to 200 micrometer. Very small sized. Protozoa, small sized mites, nematodes, and other kind of very small amoeba, ciliates, and flagellates, they occur near the surface soils. And you can say they are having a very range vertical distribution. Microflora includes bacteria, soil, fungi, soil actinomycetes, blue-green algae, and they are growing fairly well in neutral soils, which is richly supplied with organic nutrients. When we see uh, that soil inhabitant bacteria, they are also divided into two categories: autotrophic bacteria, heterotrophic bacteria. We know that autotrophic bacteria is deriving their energy from the oxidation of simple carbon compounds or from the inorganic substances and their carbon from the atmospheric CO2. Autotrophic because they can prepare their own food, they know the photosynthesis process. The common autotrophic bacteria of soil are nitrifying bacteria, hydrogen bacteria, sulfur bacteria, iron bacteria, manganese bacteria, and carbon monoxide bacteria apart from methane bacteria. Most of soil bacteria are heterotrophic bacteria. It is depending upon the organic matter of soil and they are depending upon the energy source and primarily concerned with the decomposition of cellulose and other carbohydrates, protein, fats and waxes. So these kind of developments one can say because the kind of organic changes which are taking place in soil and the release of nitrogen is taking place apart from phosphorus and other nutrients for plants. We have already discussed about nitrogen in the beginning of the lecture. The common nitrogen fixing bacteria are rhizobium, which is occurring in the root nodules of leguminous plants. We will discuss in details under nitrogen cycle. Azotobacter, Clostridium, Pasturinium are two other examples. They are freely occurring in soil. Majority of soil fungi are found in acidic soils. This is an important point for prelims exam. They may be parasitic, saprophytic and symbiotic. We will discuss that also. I am just introducing you to the keywords. Mesofauna, that is microarthropods, or you can say springtails, are important members of this group. There are large nematodes also, and there may be spiders, there may be harvestmen, potworms, insect larvae, millipedes, and so on. Macro, large animals whose body size is greater than 1 centimeter. That means mollusca, the large insects, and arachnids and soil-dwelling vertebrates. Earthworms and wood ants are very good example of that. They are constantly breaking off debris on the forest floor, even you visit any wildlife area. Similarly, a dung beetle rolling away a ball of dung. This will provide beetle enriching with food. Mole is almost blind. Sensitive whiskers and good sense of smell is very important. And powerful feet and claws, they are also used to dig the soil, and that's how they survive. The ground dwelling plants such as you can say cursorial, those who are running such as ostrich, wolves, cat, bears, hyenas, and then another term is saltatory, those who are jumping like rodents, rabbits, wallabies, kangaroos, or you can say graviportal, which are heavy such as turtles, elephants, hippopotamus, and so on. They are exhibiting different kind of adaptation in different kind of soils. For example, if the soil is firm and hard, Large animals inhabiting the aquatic system tend to have small hooves or paws. If the soil is wet and spongy, they will have broad hooves and paws in that context. So, in this lecture, we have discussed in details about other aspects. What is atmosphere? What are the layers of atmosphere? What is water? How it is linked with the adaptation and other kind of animals, about oxygen, about nitrogen, and we have discussed in details about soil, giving the basic and very important understanding. So just make your own notes, revise it, Google key concepts, look for illustration and examples, and we will discuss further things in our interactions and next sessions. Thank you very much, and do join, subscribe, and get success with Unsarkari.